Good afternoon, and welcome to the J&J Consulting Services Incorporated investor call. Today is November 28th, 2023 at 1 p.m. Pacific time. My name is Jeff Winkler. I am the court-appointed receiver for J&J Consulting Services and all the other defendants as well. First off, I want to give a disclaimer that anything that I say here today should not be considered legal or accounting advice. And if you have any questions related to legal or accounting issues, I recommend that you reach out to competent counsel in order to get that information. Any description of any of the parties here should be considered innocent until proven guilty. But I wanted to have this call today to give you guys an update as to where we're at with a variety of different things and to be able to answer some questions that you guys have previously submitted to us. As a reminder, as far as the timing of events and the way things go, we started this case off by, collecting a bunch of the different assets that were available. We've done a lot of investigating. We're currently in the middle of a very large forensic accounting project, which was necessitated by the lack of any centralized or detailed accounting. We've been selling assets on a regular basis. And at some point here in the near future, when we finish the forensic accounting process, then we will begin a claims process and start talking about distribution and some of those other related issues. So now I'm going to jump into some of the questions that we received from investors. So the first question first group has to do with defendants and other parties in the case. Has anyone besides Matt Beasley been charged or convicted of any crimes yet? Do you foresee anyone else being charged? So as of right now, my understanding is the only person who's been charged in this case is Matthew Beasley. Whether or not other parties do end up being charged is up to the U.S. Attorney's Office and their discretion. Obviously, we are providing information as it's necessary and are happy to cooperate with the U.S. Attorney. But ultimately, that is their decision as to who they charge and when they charge. So we don't really have any understanding going forward of what or who they will be charging moving forward. Next question is, do you have any updated information regarding the perpetrators being convicted or serving time? My understanding is that Matt Beasley has a trial date set for early next year. As to whether or not that trial will go forward, I'm not sure, or it could end up being delayed. But as of now, that's what we know about what is coming up. Does Paula Beasley have a lot of assets that she is not turning over? So as of right now, a number of the defendants have a few different assets that are still in their possession that we are in the process of actually turning over. We wanted to give them some time and opportunity to be able to find new housing and new transportation. As far as Mrs. Beasley goes, she's been very cooperative with me and has assisted me in the various different efforts that I have. She is subject to a contempt and motion right now related to the sale of some assets that happened very early, or actually even before this case started. And is in the process of finding counsel to represent her in that, and that issue will be dealt with here in the next 30 to 60 days. Next question is, does Matt Beasley have a criminal trial coming up? Our understanding is that he does have a criminal trial coming up. I believe it is scheduled for February, although I don't yet know if that trial date will hold or if that will end up getting pushed back. Is Matthew Beasley still in jail? My understanding is that he is. As of a couple of weeks ago, I know that he was, and my understanding is that he will be there until his trial, and then potentially after if he's convicted. Was he convicted of the crime, and if so, how long is the sentence? He has not been convicted yet. The trial has not happened, and his sentence could vary very widely depending on a number of factors. So we can't really speculate as to what that will be. Will you please explain more on who Christopher Madsen is and what his connection with the Ponzi scheme is? The only thing I can really say about Chris Madsen is he is one of the defendants that's named in the SEC's complaint as a relief defendant, and he was a promoter like many other people in this scheme. Next question has to do with litigation, and the first question has to do with where does the Wells Fargo lawsuit sit currently? So last month we had a meeting with a negotiation session with Wells Fargo Bank in front of a court-ordered, in front of a mediator that was chosen by the parties. And we discussed a lot of the different issues that are outstanding. We will be meeting and conferring with them again in late January. And then we have another mediation session set for the end of February. And at that point, we hope to be able to negotiate and come up with a resolution, but whether or not that will happen is still unknown. A lot of the issue surrounds the amount of damages that are potentially out there. And in order to come up with that number completely, we need an opportunity to finish our forensic accounting in order to do that. As I said, we are working on it. We will have the first stage of that forensic accounting complete by the end of this year. And then there will be another stage that will be completed by the middle of next year. The question is, if the mediation at the end of February is not successful, does that mean it will resume the litigation? Yeah, the litigation actually doesn't stop as part of the process of doing these mediations. But if we are unable to come to a resolution, then the litigation would continue, and there would be certain motions that would be filed after that point. Can you tell us the amount that you're hoping to settle on? Once you mentioned a $100 to $300 million range, is that still correct? We are obviously going to try to settle for as much as we can. I really cannot put a number on that today because we have not finished the forensic accounting, so we don't know what that damages number is. But I feel like that there's a great opportunity for us to reach an agreement with Wells Fargo, and that one that will compensate investors. How are you determining a number regarding how much Wells Fargo should pay in the damages compensation? Once we finish the forensic accounting, we'll have an idea of what the investors' damages are, and typically we will try to settle as close to that number as possible, so we can get investors as much money as potentially possible back into their hands. The next question is, what are the chances of receiving any type of settlement with Wells Fargo? Litigation, it's really tough to say whether or not the parties will be able to settle or not. In a lot of these instances, we are able to settle these cases and come to an agreement. But again, there's a lot that still has to be worked out in order for that to be determined at this point. What is the anticipated amount? Again, same answer as before. We don't yet know that number. Our belief is that the damages are the total amount lost by investors minus the amount that they got back. And so we think that will be the total amount of the loss. We don't yet know what that number is. And so once we finish the forensic accounting, we will have that number, and we'll be able to use that number then as our damages number. Let's see. I read somewhere online that Jeff commented that he feels Wells Fargo will possibly settle for over 100 million. Is there hope for a lot more than 100 million? Again, it's hard to say. And, the $100 million number is not a number that I have used as stating what I think that we will settle for. We think that the damages are at least $100 million. And so that's where that number comes from. And, but we are going to try to get the maximum extent we can based on what the actual damages are. Next question. Why is Wells Fargo lawsuit for only 100 million? The lawsuit is not just for 100 million. The lawsuit says at least 100 million. We believe the number to be pretty significantly in excess of that, but we don't know what that exact number is until we finish the forensic accounting. Are you able to tell us in detail how mediation went with Wells Fargo? Unfortunately, I cannot give the specifics of what happened in the mediation because the mediation is a confidential procedure. But what we can tell you is that we did make progress, and that we have a plan in place to meet and go over specific documents regarding the damages that we believe exist in this case, which will set us up for the mediation at the end of February. Questions about assets. How much money has been collected to date? I don't have the exact number on me. We do think that the amount of cash and assets we have are in excess of $80 million net of any security interest in them that will have to be paid. And we do believe that number will continue to grow as we move forward. Next question is, how much more money do you expect to recover? There are a lot of variables that go into what that number is going to be, including the litigation against Wells Fargo, but there could be potential litigation against other third parties, financial institutions, attorneys, accountants, and others. And so until we have a good idea of what our damages are against all those different entities, we won't know what the total amount we will be able to recover is. Again, our hope is to recover as much money as possible. What is the percentage? What percentage of the money as a whole has been collected so far? Since we have not finished the forensic accounting, we don't yet know how much money had gone back to investors as a whole. So we won't yet know how much of the total has been returned and how much of it's still outstanding versus how much we've collected. So those are numbers that we continue to work on as we work on this forensic accounting project. And just for reference, this project is now involving well over 400 bank accounts and tens of thousands of transactions over about a 5-year period of time. And so it is a very complex process, and we're working through it as quickly as we can. How many properties, vehicles, boats, and planes are left to sell? There is one outstanding property as of right now. There are a couple of vehicles, and then there are some other smaller assets that we're working to sell through, some of the jewelry and others. But we do anticipate a second round of assets as we continue to work with the defendants on a variety of different remaining assets. On the website, all the cars, merchandise have said coming soon. When will these be updated? The website, the reason why they weren't posted there is most of the stuff sold prior to actually putting it on the website. And so we've not been using the website as an avenue for updating that information because it's just been changing too quickly. However, we will continue to use the website to update regarding other issues in the case, including the court filings and other related issues with the third-party litigation. Are you still going after assets? Yes. Yeah, we continue to go after them on a regular basis. We get, we learn information through our forensic accounting about potential assets, in addition to information that we get from investors. And every time we get a tip, we will follow up on that and see if we can't figure out and find more assets. How long do you anticipate being in the asset recovery process? We will be in the asset recovery process until this case is closed. So to the extent we continue to find assets, we will continue to go after them and recover them for the benefit of investors. Can you tell me why Shane Jagger's home in Cypress Cove in San Clemente has not been seized yet? That has been part of an agreement that was between the parties regarding his living arrangements. However, like I said, we will continue to evaluate those and continue to gather additional properties and liquidate them for the benefit of investors. What percentage of the accounting is finished, and when do you estimate to be completed? The percentage completed is a challenging question because we don't yet necessarily know what the end looks like because we continue to find new information as we go. As I stated before, the first stage of the forensic accounting with the real high level review of the ins and the outs of the money, we anticipate to be wrapped up. At least we will have the data by the end of December, and we'll have analysis done by the middle of January on that. And then we will have a second stage regarding individual investors and their investments in preparation of a claims process that will be completed by the middle of next year. To help the forensic accounting move faster, why have you not asked investors to voluntarily turn over bank statements or transactions in order to reverse the work? Could be getting bank statements from individual investors as opposed to being able to get the complete set of bank records, including copies of checks, wires, and other things, would make it far more administratively difficult in order to do the forensic accounting if we're having to gather that information from each person. Not to mention, we really need the underlying information from the defendants to understand where the money went, where it came in from, and how it was being spent. Why aren't you going after everyone that made more money than they put in? So that is a question regarding clawback, and the answer to that is that it's likely that we will actually be going after that money. However, we need to finish the forensic accounting so we have a definitive idea of who owes money and how much they owe. In order to sue somebody, we need to have to ensure that we actually have a case against them. And as part of forensic accounting, if you've ever been involved in one, you know that you learn new information every day. And somebody who we think may have been a net winner from an investment perspective may end up being a loser at the end of the day when we find out more information. So we have to go through that process before we can finalize who is a net winner. The investors that were long enough to receive more funds, are they going to be paying that said overage back? The determination of that has not been made. That will be up to the court as to whether or not they allow that. Typically, we will actually go after that money and ask that it be returned. Why aren't you going after everyone that made more money than they put in? Same question, same answer. Why aren't let's see, still the same. Sorry, there's multiple questions here. It's the same question. How much remaining money would you estimate can still be retrieved from those who benefited from the Ponzi scheme? We don't have that number yet. We are in the process of refining that number, but it's still going to be some weeks before we have that information. Have you guys started the clawback proceedings? We have not yet, because again, we don't yet have solid numbers on what everybody has put in and what they got back. Unfortunately, due to the number of parties involved, the number of transactions and the dollar amounts involved, this is a highly complex accounting that has to be pieced together from, like I said, hundreds and hundreds of bank accounts. Some benefactors of the scheme have stated they won't return money of the ill-gotten gains. How you'll handle that? So typically we start by asking people to return the money, and if they don't, and the money makes sense, then we will sue them for that money. Is there a general idea of how much money was paid in taxes to the IRS by the defendants? We've gotten reports from specific defendants about that, and we are working through different avenues to try to get some of that money returned. Next question is about the claims process. How we know if you recognize us as an investor and if you have the right totals as far as what we put in and receive back in distributions. So the claims processes can be done in various different ways, but our hope is that due to the extent of the forensic accounting that we're doing, that we will have a good understanding of what investors are owed, and we will be able to send out that information to investors and ask them to verify the information. If we're not able to do that, or if the information does not match, then we will ask investors to provide detailed information about their investments and provide proof of that. But given the amount of work that's gone into this claims process, I believe that it will be a much simpler process where we're able to work with investors to understand, to make sure we understand what their investments are. When will the claims process window open to submit an official claim? Typically, we will run the claims process as soon as we finish with the final forensic accounting, because then we will have all the information we need in order to be able to do a reconciliation and audit of any claims that are filed. Are there opportunity for punitive claims? When in litigation, to the extent that we think that a claim for punitive damages exists, we will seek that. I used a HELOC to invest in the scheme. Will investors be allowed to file claims for their interest paid? So typically, interest is not something that is paid in a typical receivership process until all principal is paid. We will need to look at the individual information around that HELOC and how that happened. But as a general rule, it's principal payments must be made to all investors in full before any interest payments can be made. What additional information will you need from creditors in order to return losses to them? We will be doing a claims process. We do believe that that claims process can be done in a simpler form where we won't require a bunch of information. And so our hope is that, by the time that we get to that, by the middle of next year, that we will actually be able to just, send out a form stating what we think the investors are owed and allow them to review it and sign off on it. And then, of course, if anybody disagrees with that, then we'll have an opportunity to work together with that. The next question is the distribution process. How is that process done? So when the claims process happens, we work with the claimants and get the claims done, and then we make a recommendation to the court as to how those claims should be treated. And as part of that recommendation, we will also then file a distribution plan, which lays out how we believe that investors should be paid back. Typically, a claims process is done on money in, money out basis. So you take all the money you put in, you subtract all the money that you got back, and that would be the amount of your claim. And then for distribution is typically done in a pro rata distribution methodology, which means that everybody who invested will get the same percentage of their approved claims paid out. So if we were doing a 25% distribution, if we had enough money to pay out 25% of all the claims that were approved, then everybody would get 25% of their allowed amount. So if you had a $10,000 claim, that would be $2,500. If you had a $100,000 claim, that would be $25,000. And so that's typically how they're paid out in that pro rata basis. You mentioned payouts to us may begin in the spring. Payouts will begin once the claims process has been completed, and then the court has approved the claims process and the distribution process. Once you are ready to make distributions, what will you need from each investor? Again, as part of that claims process, we will collect anything that we need from investors to ensure that the money gets returned to them as easily as possible. How will that be dispersed? Typically in a receivership process, that is dispersed by check. However, there may be other possibilities for other types of distributions, and we continue to look into those and are listening to investors if you have a preference. What makes a disbursement worthwhile? That's a question that we get oftentimes. Once the claims process and then the distribution process is approved, we'll be in a position to do an immediate payout at that point because we hold enough cash to do so. The next question is, when will subsequent payment be made? And that's going to be based specifically on the type of, the type of, or the amount of money that we've collected, what money we foresee coming in the future and hear that, and then how much money will then be available to make that distribution minus any money we have to hold back for potential taxes and things like that. Next question has to do with the receiver and the team. Is there a P&L for all monies received and expense out? Where can we find that? Yes, that information is available in my report that is filed on a quarterly basis. It shows all money that's come in and all money that's been paid out. Why are the lawyers the only people that are benefiting from this? What's the incentive to finish when they're getting paid with our money? And that's a good question. So, in this case, unfortunately, without somebody like me being here, everybody would have to file their own lawsuits. They'd be responsible for going after trying to collect this money. Some people would get money back, some people would not. And the attorneys ultimately would win. In this case, I have a small group of attorneys working on this throughout all the different pieces of it, as opposed to each investor hiring their own attorney and charging their own fees. So we find that it actually ends up being significantly cheaper. Now, it's going to take a little bit longer to get your money, potentially, right? But, even if you'd sued individually, you still have to go through that court process. And that can be a very long and drawn out process that can take, years and years before it reaches resolution. What is the expected timeline for wrapping up this case? A lot of that is unknown because of the litigation that exists here, but our hope is to be able to do a distribution next year and then to continue to do distributions as we collect additional assets and fees. Let's see, why has a special counsel been appointed when the government already has lawyers on their payroll? So the government lawyers do not actually prosecute the claims of the receivership case. They prosecute a civil action against the defendants for their wrongdoing. But in order to gather all the money and litigate against people that have gotten extra money, that takes an outside party to do that. And so that's why we have a special litigation counsel that's been appointed to do that. Questions about next steps and some of the other things. Roughly how many investors have you currently found? Our investor list is well over 1,100 at this point. And in addition to the fact that we have also discovered additional investors through the forensic accounting projects, which will ultimately be added to that list as we continue through the process. Communication, how do we contact you? The easiest way to contact us is by using the email address contact@jjconsulting-receivership.com. Again, that's contact@jjconsulting-receivership.com. Or by calling us at area code 702-832-2299. Again, that's 702-832-2299. And that information has also been put in the chat for you. Next question is, what if I have further questions as a result of the conference call? We highly recommend that you go to our website, which is jjconsulting-receivership.com. And there'll be a lot of documents filed there with all the pleadings with the court that are of any importance will be filed there for your review. In addition to my reports, and these investor calls are recorded and put there as well. The next question is there anything we can be doing? If you haven't already done so, please make sure you register on the website so we know who you are and we have your current contact information. If you've moved, please reach out to us and let us know that. Otherwise, we will continue to reach out to you as we need information. It is possible that there will be parties that reach out to you specifically. It could be the litigation counsel with questions about your dealings with Wells Fargo, or it could be us with questions regarding certain transactions that we see in the forensic accounting. But we will get a hold of you if we have any questions. Will anybody be contacting us in the near future? Yes, you're going to receive notice in the future regarding any of the court filings, of course, that happen, in addition to the claims process and the distribution process when those happen, in addition to the forensic accounting report, which will be filed in the summer of next year. So all that information will continue to be available on the website and available if you guys have questions. At this time, I'm going to look through the chat questions that have come up and see if there's any questions that we haven't talked about. And see if we can answer them. I know there's some questions about the interest being earned on the account. Currently, the interest being earned on the account is approximately 1.5%. We are looking into the ability to put some of this into T-bills. We do have some related issues surrounding the insurance on the money. As you know, typically FDIC only covers up to $250,000 worth of insurance, but we need to make sure that all of this money is insured in case something happens. And so we have to be very careful about how we move forward, but we have been in discussions with a couple of different financial institutions about some options. What is needed from an investor to secure a claim? You will be given the opportunity to file a claim. That information will come out, and you will receive notice of that. If you're concerned about whether or not you'll get it, please do make sure we have your contact information. In addition, we will file notice in the local newspapers as well as national publications. But again, if you keep checking that website, then I think you'll make sure that you'll see everything that's coming in. Question: if you identify net winners that you don't plan to pursue, when will you disclose that to us? So that information will all be disclosed as part of our reporting and as part of any of the pleadings that we do. Typically, if we decide not to go after people at a certain dollar range, that information will be put into the motion that we file with the court to seek permission to go after people who are net winners. So if there's a certain class that we are not going to go after, that will be disclosed at that time. Let's see. Why isn't the deadline set for all claims to be submitted? It's very simple, because right now, in order for us to have done a claims process, we would have had to request every single investor send us all their bank statements, copies of all their checks, all their wire confirmation. And so trying to do that in the middle of trying to finish the forensic accounting as well would have been very, very difficult, because we would have been getting bank statements from different sources, and we would have incomplete bank statements because most of these accounts were open for the full 5 years of the scheme. So we need to make sure that we have a complete record of all of them, as well as all the backup and other identifying information. The goal being that when you do file a claim, it's going to be a much quicker process and a much simpler process, and cost investors nearly nothing, because you won't be asked to go out and get stuff that we will already have and be able to answer. Why is Jeff Judd not in jail? Again, that's up to the U.S. attorney who they choose to prosecute. And so, we only work on the civil side of the case. So if you have questions about that, I would recommend reaching out to the U.S. attorney's office in Las Vegas. How much money is being spent every quarter by your office, and are all the accountants and attorneys on average? I don't have that exact number, but I would recommend that you review the reports that we file on a quarterly basis. All of that is in there, and it's made public. We have been spending money in order to get this done, but our contention and our belief and the results, I think, show that the money we've been spending has been bringing in large sums of money, and will continue to do so. This forensic accounting is an expensive process, but if it leads to a 9-figure settlement with a financial institution, it will have been well worth the amount of money that we spent in order to put it together. Let's see, is there any way to be sure our claim is included in the forensic accounting work? That will come as part of the claims process. If we end up with questions specifically about transactions in the accounting, we will reach out. But again, we need to make sure that you have filed with us, so we know who you are and how to get a hold of you if we need to. Somebody said that somebody has a $100,000 ring. Yeah, if you could send us details on that via email, that would be very helpful. Clawback status with the Mormon Church. We have been in contact with people at the church. They have agreed that once the forensic accounting is done and we have the total amount of tithing that was done, that they are going to be returning that money. What are the odds of receiving anything from Wells based on your past experience? I would say very high. I do believe, in we would not have filed litigation unless we believed that Wells Fargo was liable and at least partly at fault for what happened in this scheme. And so we wanted, so that's why we were going after them. And we do believe that we will end up taking, a significant sum from Wells Fargo due to that. Let's see. I'm just reviewing some of these questions real quick. Some of these are very specific questions, and if you have some very specific questions related to your specific claim, do please reach out to us. Question about the clawback, the clawback of the tithing. I think I already answered that. We will be working on that. The question is, what is the estimated investor exposure this time? We don't have that number yet. So that's part of the forensic accounting. The idea behind the forensic accounting is we got to figure out exactly how much money came in and where it came from, and how much money went out and who it went to. We know some of the money was spent on homes and cars and boats and airplanes, but some of that money also was returned to investors and through multiple different avenues. And so we are ultimately trying to figure out the total amount that came in from investors and the total amount that went out to investors, and then that will tell us how much exposure or what the loss is to investors. And then that will then become the kind of the basis for the damages that we assert against these different third parties that we're litigating against. It looks like that's all the questions that came in so far. So I'd like to thank you guys for taking the time to join us. If you do have specific questions, please do reach out to us and allow us an opportunity to talk with you. I do just ask that you be patient with us, especially right after one of these calls, because we do tend to get inundated. We focused a lot of our staff right now on the forensic accounting, but we do have staff that are dedicated to answering these calls, but it might take a couple days to get back to you. So please do be patient with us, especially around the holidays. I appreciate you guys and appreciate the opportunity to continue to do this. And I do feel like that the results of this case are going to be good. We just got to continue to do the hard work to get to that point. Thank you again for your time, and please do reach out if you have any questions.